nice to see everybody, and thank you for having us here. When Jim first asked me to lead a discussion around workplace trends post-pandemic, immediately I thought about two women that I thought could really bring great value to the conversation, and that's Sarah Dunn and Celia Brown. Celia is an independent director of 1-800-Flowers Board of Directors. She's also the chairperson of the Compensation Committee. And Sarah Dunn is near and dear to my heart. She was my boss for, close to 7 years when I worked at Coach, which is now called Tapestry. But when I thought about these two ladies, it occurred to me that these were women who have spent a lot of time in their career raising women, bringing them up the ladder, if you will, in the corporate world. And I think my own experience, I've benefited from their greatness. So thank you, and to the panel. So I want to give each of you a chance to introduce yourself. Sarah, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about you and any thoughts you have around post-pandemic trends to start.
Great. So I was head of HR at Tapestry for about 14 years. So loved having Faeth on my team. Was sorry when she decided to move on to her own head of HR role. But before going into HR, I was actually on the business side in operations and in various P&L roles, both in London and in New York. You can tell I'm not native of these shores, but I've actually lived here for 30 years, and I think I'm way more American than I sound. I just can't quite lose the accent. I'm actually going through, a big change in my career because I retired from full-time work about 6 months ago, having led Tapestry through the pandemic, through the major changes that we see in work culture, and was just ready for my next chapter, which includes a number of advisory things, as well as more time for my grandson and my garden and all the good things that really make me happy.
That's great. Thank you. Celia.
Thank you, Faith. In addition to my post-retirement life as a board director and on the board of 1-800-Flowers and other board service, before that I was a chief human resources officer in the financial services industry at what is now Willis Towers Watson, what is now AXA XL in the insurance and reinsurance business. So for those of you who were here before, Bermuda is another world. I'll agree with that. We were there a lot. And interested to tackle this topic when Faith approached me to talk about the post-pandemic culture. In the olden days, 2020, like before the pandemic, if you talked about culture, you talked about the way work got done, you talked about who got promoted, you talked about trust and values, and there were so many aspects to the word culture that it was almost one of those hard things to define and get a grip on. And in the current day, culture is we are in office, we are hybrid, we are flexible, we are all fully remote. It seems like the entire conversation is about that aspect of the workplace, and the only thing that we know for sure about it is no one has figured it out. Everyone is talking about it, people are fighting about it, people are debating it, people are espousing a culture on the one hand and operating quite differently. We are this kind of culture, but maybe we're not. So I think that's an opportunity for a bit of exploration here.
Yeah. So we all know that when the pandemic occurred, we started to work in a remote work style. Many companies have come back. Some have been hybrid. I was sharing with Sarah and Celia yesterday. I heard someone speaking about their popular airline. They have 25,000 associates. 24,000 cannot work remotely. Only 1,000 can, yet they spend most of their time talking about what should we do for those 1,000. And so I would agree that it has certainly taken up quite a bit of our time as leaders as the culture keepers, so to speak. So Sarah, having just led Tapestry through this, what other things did you find influencing culture as it relates to the pandemic?
I think what we found very early in the pandemic was that we had to find ways of keeping people glued together. So if everybody in the corporate office was remote, we had to lean into purpose, into social impact, into how we really engaged our employees in different ways. At the same time, I think that this complete jarring event had a huge benefit in bringing managers and employees closer together. I was a manager going into the home of my employees, seeing them struggle with juggling kids and small bedrooms and poor Zoom connections and whatever it was. And I think that broke down a wall. And I think we're seeing that now come to fruition in more discussion about mental health, more openness about mental health, because that wall was broken down. And I think that's a huge benefit.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, you struck a nerve because 30 years ago, I tried to encourage my company to allow telecommuting. That's what we called it. For those of you who are young, it was telecommuting. It was not remote work. And it was going to be the way to keep moms in the workforce.
Yeah.
It was the silver bullet that would have made a big change in how women were able to navigate and eliminate at least the commute time, if nothing else, from the pressures of their work. All of a sudden, we're talking about it like it's here, it's obvious, and it was not. It was a big journey. It was not well received 30 years ago.
It wasn't well received 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Actually.
Exactly.
So, as you think about your own careers and your own experiences, how do you think things have changed from when you were coming up as an executive, as working moms, working women, to what we're seeing and experiencing today?
To me, the biggest change is in parental leave. One of the biggest changes is in parental leave. When I first moved to this country 30 years ago, I was horrified that women were getting 6 weeks of leave to become a new parent. And I obviously came from a more established process in Europe where I think we got 4.5 months even 35 years ago. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week about the two Sarahs, a Sarah in New York. I only looked at it because it was the name Sarah. A Sarah in Sweden and a Sarah I think in Seattle. And even today, the huge differences in parental leave and the provision of services for mothers, which is really, the US is one of the worst developed countries in the world for parental leave. But I do think it's getting better. And I think the pandemic, was part of the movement that has created better parental leave. Although, Faith, I was just saying to you, what I'm most excited about is actually fathers taking parental leave. Over the last 4 years, there's been something like a 17% increase in women taking leave. There's been a 183% increase in men taking parental leave. And that's going to be good for all of us. It may take a generation to come to fruition, but I'm so excited about that.
Mm-hmm. So what has changed in my career? I have to say, not enough.
True.
And not that much. Certainly what has changed, just listening today, are the number of women running their own companies, starting companies, but small companies. Mm-hmm. Women who are incredible entrepreneurs, who are investing, who are thinking about women as investors. In the strict corporate world, certainly in the financial services world, it's been a long slog, and I don't think there's nearly enough women at the top. It maybe you have a sprinkling and a few more CEOs, but if you look at the C-suite, and you look at the C-suite outside of the corporate functions, outside of HR, legal, finance, it's slim pickings, as they say in the South. And it's that way because we haven't addressed the pipeline. Yeah. We have continued to fail to keep women in the workforce, moving forward, figuring out how to do it all. Mm-hmm. And it's I would like to be. I'm very hopeful and optimistic because we're here talking, and I think there are more enlightened men who are sharing in that, and they have daughters, and they're seeing what it's like when their daughters aren't getting as good a court time or ice time or uniform as their sons, and there are many ways that things are and will change, but it's
Taking too long.
taking too long.
Yeah.
I
So-
feel like that.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you. So let's talk a little bit about remote work. We know that that has helped equalize some of the playing field. The family unit, we're thinking about it differently. Men are potentially fathers more engaged in their home lives. But is there a consequence to hybrid and remote working? And if so, what is that to the individual?
I definitely think there's a consequence, and I don't think we will know exactly what that is for several years to come. There was an article recently about the power of proximity, and if you're not proximate with your colleagues or with your manager, are you getting the feedback? Are you getting what I call the happenstance learning of just being in the workplace rather than on scheduled Zooms and working independently? And I really worry about that for younger workers, just learning and observing and just not getting what they need to really develop their careers.
Thoughts?
So I would agree with that, but a speaker so many hours ago today that I don't even remember who it was, but I do remember the notion of don't think about it as obstacles, but opportunities.
Yep.
I think this presents a very powerful opportunity for women. Women are particularly good at connecting.
True.
So use that superpower. It's a chance to use that superpower to figure out how you're going to be better at connecting, and being visible and present, whether you're Zooming or in 2 days a week or whatever it is. But that connection
Yes.
is a great opportunity. I have a young man in my life who was remote working and who smugly said to me, "They have no idea what I'm doing." That was about 3 weeks before he was laid off in a big rip because they had no idea what he was doing. Be sure that
visible.
Be visible.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
chance to distinguish yourself with how you're being visible. And if it's a virtual culture, if it's a hybrid culture, just don't disappear.
Yes.
Don't disappear. Use it as a and I'll flip it around. If you are a manager, if you're a leader, or if you're an executive, be better at drawing your team in and having people feel connected. I heard a story of someone who was working in a bank in a hybrid situation, and they went in on Mondays and Thursdays. And he went for the first day on a Monday, and they had a team meeting. It was a global team, and he asked somebody, "Well, where's the conference room?" "Well, we take the calls from our computers." So they're in the office, but they're having a global team meeting in their own separate workstations. They got a conference room. He said, no, we're not doing that. They got in the room and took the opportunity to be so
together.
obvious,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
maybe not so much.
Yeah.
So just to bring the remote hybrid discussion to a close, I think that what we're seeing is, and what we heard a lot today, is women are better at making connections. Women are better at bringing people together and collaborating. But we also know that women do more of the invisible work, the work that needs to get done, that gets done, but nobody really knows that it's getting done. And I remember when Sarah and Celia and I were talking, we talked about the advice of don't do that. Make sure whatever you're doing is visible. And I think that really speaks to what Celia was saying. They weren't kidding when they said how fast time goes. So I want to move into mental health, because I think mental health care, we know that associates have really prioritized mental health in the post-pandemic time. And companies are moving from what used to be just an EAP to probably broader interventions. And I want to get your thoughts, Sarah and Celia, around what you've seen, what you're hearing, and what else you think employers can be doing, but also what the people in this room can be doing to help preserve their well-being.
Look, I think one of the biggest changes in the last few years is people's willingness to talk about mental health in the workplace. Rather like menopause, it was almost invisible 5 years ago. And we've seen a huge growth in support apps, in support services, in companies providing mental health capabilities and support, which I think is tremendously important. And we've all been very stifled over way too many years in terms of freedom and willingness to talk about mental health and put time into making it a reality. And I think workplace flexibility does just that. I really don't like this sort of remote and hybrid piece. I like flexibility, and that allows me to weave my personal and my work life in together in a way that, you know, in my younger career, we didn't have that choice.
Right.
I made really bad decisions about my children as a result of being in the office too much.
I hear you. I agree with you 100%. In fact, we have a hybrid work at 1-800-Flowers. I choose to be in the office most days of the week because for me, that's where I get my energy. It's more fun and more engaging. But it is important to me to put my children on the bus and take them to school and make sure that I'm seeing them off for the day. And so, you know, I feel like I have the opportunity to be flexible and take an early meeting. And I think that the pandemic has made that easier. It's enabled technology. Has
totally.
enabled that.
You make me think of a story that it goes back to earlier in my career as a working mom, and we never talked about self-care. I mean, the closest you came to talking about self-care was whether you actually allowed yourself to use your vacation days. I mean, that was your vacation days that you were entitled to have. So it was there were some grueling years. And I recall at the dinner table with my daughters, having a conversation it was a career day or something at school, and one of my daughters said, I don't think I'm gonna work when I grow up. Because why? Because Mom, you're always tired.
Yes.
And I realized I would get home and I would sort of plop down and I'd say, oh, I'm beat. And that's what she heard.
Yeah.
And rather than somebody else earlier talking about hoping their daughter was proud of them, my daughter was hearing, and I will just say, she never heard that again. I would say, wow, what a great day I had. And it was
Lies.
We know she's working now.
But yes, and she is working now. So
Phew.
I can't believe we have to wrap up almost already. So I just want to talk about a little bit organizational resilience. You know, we were all surprised by the pandemic. We were all quickly navigating new territory. It was our new normal. Here we are, 2023, halfway through almost. What have we learned? And if we're in this situation again, are we ready? Sarah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think we've got to be much readier. We are much more ready. I think what we've seen is companies really embrace the whole life, bringing work, culture, social impact into the workplace in a way, sense of purpose, which is going to make companies more resilient. And workers, employees, have so much more agency. Companies want to retain, even in times when there is a downturn, they need to retain their talent. And I think worker agency, employer agency is here to stay. And that will make companies more resilient.
Great. Yeah, and I think another thing that we have learned as in organizations is it is a little bit of your point about resiliency, but we don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
And it's probably not what we're thinking. Nobody predicted the pandemic. A year ago, people weren't talking about ChatGPT. That wasn't a thing. We've got to be better in organizations at trying to keep our eye on what's coming and learn how to be more flexible and adaptable to change. Because
totally.
It's
a
on
constant.
steroids. Yeah, it used to be a cliche, but now we just went through it in a way that we couldn't have imagined before.
Final thoughts? Advice for the group?
Look, I've just left the workplace, but I'm actually really excited for the future of the workplace. And I think that we've seen step changes. It's going to continue to evolve. And I think it places women in a much stronger place than they've ever been as employees.
And I always, in an era of change, which we say is always, my advice to women is always, do not think that you can just put your head down and it's going to wash over you and it's not going to happen to you. Instead, lift yourself up, find opportunity, find points of differentiation, and go for it rather than have it come
Yeah,
at you.
totally agree. Good advice.
Thank you both very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.